So pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may join the Zoom link via computer, via audio, or both video and audio. The information has been posted on the an agenda through the town clerk on the town's website and also at the town hall. If you'd prefer to attend via phone, you may do so by dialing in. Information was provided that with the passcode. No in-person attendance at the meeting of the public or members of the public would be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so, despite the best efforts, we will post on the town's website, town.plympton.ma.us, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive recording of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can also be found on the Town of Plympton website. So that's all I got.
I'll second that.
That was an outstanding job. You delayed long enough for the rest of my committee to join. So
perfect.
Nicely done. Thank you very much for doing
You're
so.
welcome.
So we'll give Mike. Oh, there he is. Mike has joined. So I will call this meeting Plympton Finance Committee to order as of 6:04 p.m.
Yes.
I don't know who's.
Eloise. Hey.
So there's somebody who has some feedback I'm getting in the background. I don't know if somebody could mute. It looks like everybody's muted.
I think it's Mike. He keeps
Mike,
lighting up. I think it's you, Mike.
There we go. Yeah, but now he won't speak for the rest of the night, though. That's the only downside. All right. So thank you very much, Christine, for kicking off the meeting. We appreciate that. Just our first item on our agenda is the review of the minutes from our previous meeting on March 21st. Mr. Lemieux sent around a copy of the minutes to the FinCom members from that meeting, and I will ask if there are any corrections or changes to be made to those minutes. If not,
move to accept as written.
thank you, Steve. Thank you, Marilyn. Roll call vote. Catherine Shepard.
Aye.
Marilyn Brown.
Aye.
Steve Lewis.
Aye.
Mike Lemieux. Nathaniel Sides, aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So in the interest of respecting some of our other attendees this evening, they have other schedules and agendas that they need to attend later this evening. I've been asked to, if we could address the warrant articles that have been presented by the Town Properties Committee, and I know Mr. Trainer, Mr. Williamson are here to review those with us. So I'll call your attention to the warrant articles that have been drawn up and circulated by Liz Dennehy for the Town Properties, and I don't know which of the Johns is going to speak, or if we would just like us to ask questions, or how you'd like to proceed.
I think our chair would like to speak.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be any surprises here. These are all articles that we had promised to put on here when we met back in March. But we have for article, looks like it's article 26 is where we start. Based on where we are and bills that we think are coming in, we've asked for $5,000 to bring that consultant and preliminary design article back up to around the $15,000 mark. We didn't use much of it until really since the beginning of the year is when we've sort of started to dig into that, and that helps us, of course, be able to bring the other articles here by doing things like testing for asbestos, which seems to have been one of our big things to do this year. So that's that article. And then, so I don't know, any questions with that one for folks? Okay. The next one here, Article 27, this is a article we're placeholding for the roofs 2 and 3 of the townhouse, so the middle and the back roofs of the townhouse, that is actually out to bid right now. And we hope to have, we're supposed to get the bids in, as it says here, on the 22nd of April. And so we would be looking for that one to supplement the funds that we put aside last year for that. So far, we've spent, Liz, it's around, what do we have, about 140 left? I think.
Yes, after we pay for all of the design work, we'll have 143,500, I believe, sitting in that account, in that article.
So, in the ideal world, the bid comes in at 142. But since that probably isn't the ideal world, there'll probably be some amount of money there. The good news is that once we appropriate that money, then we can award and move ahead with getting those, at least those 2 parts of the roof sorted. Any questions on that? Okay. Article 28. This is, we talked about some items of the library that we're looking to address. That includes lighting in the old part of the library and the 2 rooms on either side of the fireplace there. We've actually, I think instead of doing track lighting, the plan is now to do some recessed lighting, which actually brings that cost down a little bit. It's also for recarpeting the children's room. And then it's also to address the hot water issue. The late breaking news on that is we had a plumber in the building, and he actually thinks there's, who's been in the building before, that there's something to do with hot water up in the attic. So Mike is chasing that down. So, maybe we'll be able to adjust this item, and possibly that hot water heater's just turned off, but that sounds too easy to me. So we'll see, but these funds would be used to do with those 3 items: hot water, carpeting, and lighting. Any questions there? Okay. Article 29. This is for the old townhouse. This is based on estimates that we had received to really get the outer shell of the building sorted out. And this is for that back L that we had to take everything out of due to the mold issue. And we gutted that back down to studs. This will not get the room completely finished, but we're looking at roof, anything to do with any siding, and really making sure that the envelope of the building is watertight again. Because right now it's not, which is why we had mold in there, because all the insulation got wet and stayed wet. And then Article 30, this is the study for the schematic design and feasibility study for a potential fire station. This number hasn't changed too much from last year. Still believe that 300,000 would get us what we need to be able to come up with an accurate number for the potential of building a station, which we can then all talk about next year in February and March and determine whether we have the money to do it or how that all works out. But this would allow us to pretty much just like we did with the police station, come up with some real numbers that we can work with to understand what the cost would be, to also make sure that the location would work, and then get the costs associated with that as well. If you go and do some soil samples and find out there's a whole bunch of loam there, then you have to take it out and bring other stuff back in, that will obviously impact the cost. So this would allow us to actually, it's sort of like on a larger scale what we do with that consultant funds we were talking about before, where we get professionals to help us actually nail down real costs so that we understand what that is about. And
John?
Yep.
Real costs. I mean, costs are extremely high right now. How is that factored in?
Well, so you'll end up doing the cost estimates wouldn't get done till closer to the end of the year. So there's going to be a fair amount of work that they need to do to understand how big the station needs to be, what sort of amenities need to be in it, how much space they need, what sort of other equipment we need, what equipment can we reuse from the existing station. And then when they get this sort of high level plans done, then they do the cost estimates off of that. So what that will be at the time will be however we are, by November, December of this year, and where costs sit. If they come down by the time if we decide to go out to bid and they come down, then that's only beneficial. The bigger issue is if they go the other way, Marilyn. Like if you had done all the work in 2019, and then we're going to go out to bid in 2020, that would have been a big problem because you wouldn't have had the money.
True.
And
So,
I'm sorry, John, does it also involve repurposing the existing building, or ruling that in or out as some sort of a long-term solution, or is this strictly looking at a new facility?
yeah, so this is strictly looking at a new facility. This would not include any design work or other improvements to the existing building. We do believe that we could repurpose that building in Plympton fashion pretty much the day that the fire department gives us the keys back. The heating system works, the lights work. We could utilize that building sort of as is. We would want to, my guess is, do in a medium term or longer term some additional work to make the building even better for its repurposed state. But you do have the kitchen that they refinish, and you do have working bathrooms and all of that. So there's a fair amount we think that could be used there, pretty much at the point that the fire department would move. But we would consider that to be a separate project of doing any design work that you want to do, or having to adjust because you have a difference in floor height there between the floor and between the apparatus floor and then the offices and kitchen. So you need to do something with that. And then depending on how you want to break the space up, take out the garage doors and put in windows or something like that. That would be a separate project when we could afford it. I think that's probably more than enough for town properties.
Any other questions for the Town Properties Committee about any of their articles?
Hey, John, it's Christine. Just out of curiosity, what's the plan for the repurpose? What are you thinking?
The idea that's been tossed around is a community/senior center, and be able to. And when everything's out of there, you're not trying to store big fire trucks in it. It's actually quite a bit of space in that room. And if you were to, just off the top of the head, imagining things, you kind of take out the doors and put in windows instead. You could end up with some pretty neat space in there, and something flexible. The other thing, you could think of is at some point when we have to do additional work in the townhouse, it also could be flexible space to move a department over, into the space for a period of time while you renovate something else. And so we would have some rather flexible use, given that it's open space there, to be able to kind of over time get everything sort of where we want it and sorted.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
I guess my concern is, along that lines of potential, and this is, too early to have this discussion, I'm sure, but it's just something that keeps recurring to me. At some point, we have the old townhouse, and then we're potentially going to have the old fire station, and we have the old police station, and we're going to have all these old buildings, quote unquote, that are going to be surplus space, and it doesn't seem to be feasible to continue to maintain all of them. So at some point, we're going to need to make a tough decision on one or more of these spaces and consolidate our efforts, I think.
Yeah, I think, the fire station, but for the fact that it can't fit its equipment and its people in it, is actually in pretty decent shape as a building from the envelope perspective. We do know there's some roof work to do, but that's estimated about $100,000. And so that's actually the roof that's in the best shape out of any of the buildings, except for the police station, which is brand new. And you do that, the fire department's done a lot of work to that, and a lot of it they've gotten donated as well to really upgrade the building as is. So I think that building in some ways might end up being in better shape than some parts of the townhouse. So, but I think it gives us a nice safety valve to be able to use the space. And then I guess the other thing I would just note, for the potential reuse of that, I think we need that space already. The townhouse is kind of tight where we have council on aging sort of wedged in there and conference space and so on. And eventually we're going to need to do something with the front of the building as well, because we've just repurposed that, which is sort of this warren of little rooms and things. So I think the fire station presents us with some good options. I don't think you're wrong in that, how much more do we have to invest in all of the buildings to keep them where they need to be? I think we're getting a pretty good idea of that, and we should have more answers in that as we continue the work going forward. But even for the old townhouse, from an envelope perspective, when we do this work, we're in pretty good shape there for a little while at least. And then inside, we have a little bit of work to do. And now it's just a matter of who's going to use the building.
I think the old townhouse is the tougher of the decisions because everything's on the second floor that's being used today.
Yeah.
And of course, once if we do this with the old fire station, then a lot of the programs that we're looking at will move to the old fire station, like the fitness group, etc.
Yeah, and as I said, I obviously that's a discussion for further down the road.
Yeah.
Several years down the road, obviously. But I think it's just something that we all need to consider. Keep it in the back of our minds.
Completely agree.
Great. I think that's all we really needed commentary from you folks. I know you have your own meeting to attend, so I'll let you sign off if you need to, or you're certainly welcome to stick around. But thank you for your time and as always for the information and the efforts on our behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As long as we've got the page open, why don't, it seems to me to make sense to, unless, is there anyone else pressed for time that needs to be elsewhere shortly that we should, otherwise I'm just going to go down through the list of the articles here and we'll ask Liz to kind of give a couple of sentences on each, if that's okay with everyone. Great. So the first article that you'll see there is the annual article, no pun intended, for the fiscal audit process. It's kind of the standard amount of money. Actually, it did go up a couple of $1,000s this year to $37,000. Similarly, the road construction article. This is $200,000 that we earmark every year from capital. So that's kind of a standard article for us as well. Rob, I know you're on. Do you want to speak to the next article, the highway vehicle article?
Yeah, sure. We're looking to replace our F-350. It's a 2007. It's got like 170,000 miles on it. It's two-wheel drive. About 7 or 8 years ago, maybe, I cut apart the dump body on it, welded in some repair panels, and we had it sandblasted and painted. It needs manifolds. It's starting to have transmission issues. The rear end's already been rebuilt in it. It was a light-duty dump truck when it was bought, and it's definitely served its purpose, and it's time to move on. I'd like to get another truck identical to the 550 that we have now. So we have one chip box. It's interchangeable between the two trucks. We have one hot box. It'll be in a hot box for asphalt for patching. It'll be interchangeable between the two trucks. We have a little slip-in sander. Those will be able to swap back and forth. They kind of help us with snow removal in the wintertime. And it's going to have the same plow as the other 550 that we have. So that way there, everything's kind of like interchangeable and standard. If something goes down, you kind of have something. You only have to stock certain parts because it's, all the same.
Sure. And would you keep the 350, or would you just part?
No, I'd rather trade it in. We don't. We're limited on storage space, and having another vehicle is another expense to maintain that I'd rather not burden my department with.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Great, thank you very much.
More than welcome.
Next article is our ongoing article for lease payments. The various lease payments we combined into one article. It's I think the exact same amount of appropriation from last year. Article 11 is solar speed limit signs. This is to purchase 2 of those annoying as hell speed limit signs that you see on every town and on the South Shore. Some of them are more annoying as others. So if I can somehow put in a word on the level of annoyance, if we can tailor that somehow, I would be in favor of that. But that's has been put forth by the police department.
Can I just say that the annoyance is purposeful, actually. And I think rather than 2, it's actually 4 of them that.
Oh, is
Correct.
it? Okay, all right, my mistake.
It's 4 of them. It's like 2 in each speed zone location. The selectmen a few years back had declared 2 speed safety zones pursuant to Mass General Law. There's one
Yes.
in the area of Ring Road and Main
And
Street.
there's one at the end of my driveway.
Yes, yes, right near there. So the intent would be to place a sign going in each direction in those 2 locations. We do get quite a few complaints from people about traffic speeding in those areas. So that seems like a useful endeavor.
I hope you all understand that I am poking fun at myself, and I am not belittling the project by any stretch of the imagination.
Not to belabor the point, but one of the goals here is if this can finally slow down traffic on Ring and Main in particular, the goal would be to avoid a big reconstruction project. So
Absolutely.
the good Lord willing, this is an easy way out if by chance it could be partially successful.
Absolutely. And it seems as though relatively short money too, I would have to say, especially if we're getting 4 of them. So the next 3 are the routine articles put forth by the assessors every year. Liz, can you explain? I guess the map subscription, I understand. The real property recollection is the reassessment of everybody, right? They actually go out and physically visit every.
Yes, they go out physically and inspect. And if you give me 1 second, I had asked Wendy for a bit of clarification. My screen isn't big enough. I'm trying to scroll through. 1 second and I can pull that up. Let me see here. I had asked for clarification on at least one of them. Yes, so every 10 years, there's a required data collection, and they have to physically go out and remeasure all of the real property in order to meet DOR compliance for fiscal 25. So they'd be doing that process, like starting that in fiscal 23.
So I guess my element of confusion is, so what does the interim, if we're already doing that, then why do we also need to do an interim property valuation?
You have to keep the property, you have to keep the property valuations up to date.
Thank you, Marilyn.
They inspect some properties every year.
Okay, all right. Yes, I guess that's what I needed to know. All right, thank you very much. I apologize for my ignorance. Article 22, the personal protective equipment by the fire department. Again, it's kind of a standard annual article.
So Lisa and I took a look at this today, just to get a handle on what they've been spending. And it does appear that it's going for all of its intended purpose. The PPE article currently has a little over $5,000 left in it. So it's possible that they won't exhaust the full balance of it by the end of the fiscal year. but they are using that to purchase various items, and all of the expenses for that one seem to be, we pulled a few particular invoices and everything seemed to fall under that realm of personal protective equipment. The chief had initially asked for more in that article, and then I had sent him something and said, oh, it looks like year to year, you've always been doing 10,000 for that and 8 for the SCBA. So I got him to come down in his request to the numbers customarily asked for. There is a chance that maybe we could take a bit from that one if, especially where he hasn't used, I mean, there's more than half of it left for this current year. So that one, I think that there might be a little room if you were looking for places to find some savings. Article 23 for the SCBA equipment, Lisa and I also pulled the data for that. And this one is going to require further discussion with the chief. There were some questions. There was one invoice in particular that was fairly pricey. And it looked like part of that may have taken into consideration a purchase for thermal imaging cameras, which he has a separate article on the books for. So we need to get some of that straightened out. And there's also, interestingly enough, another SCBA article on the books. I'm not sure when that one originated, but one of them has $6,400 maybe in it. And the other one is negative, I want to say $5,400, but I also think he may have been waiting for a grant. So we need to get clarification from him on that and kind of get those accounts and everything cleaned up with that. So more to come on that one. I think we can refine the amount a little bit, but I just want to make sure that everything's balancing out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just for discussion purposes, I think we started funding this, I'd have to go back and see, but I'd say about 5 years ago when it became apparent that the SCBA equipment had been ignored for a while, and we said we would fund it at the original ask, I believe, was for $16,000 way back, and we agreed to fund it at half of that for an extended period of time to eventually replace the outdated equipment. And at some point, I would have to think we're getting close to being there where we have replaced the majority of the equipment. So I would appreciate the follow-up on that.
Okay. And then the fleet equipment repair and certifications, he did compile some information about, say, for example, the ladder inspections and the hose inspections, which I did forward along to you. I know that he's been plagued by unfortunate luck as far as repairs to some of the vehicles and everything, but I think $30,000 is a big ask for the first year of doing this, and where he wants to keep his equipment and repair budget line fully intact from last year. So maybe a more modest amount for that if you were looking for somewhere to take some savings. And I'm not sure, I don't know how you feel about going the article route for this. I mean, there could also be a discussion. I was trying to be diplomatic in case there are any viewers. You know, I don't know if it's worth maybe boosting his equipment and repair budget line by a little bit and not having the article. The nice part about the article is that it would sit there year to year. So if he didn't use all of it, I would just worry that they'd go through it very quickly.
So we discussed this a few weeks ago when the chief was here, and at the time we expressed our reluctance, I think, to go the article route, and discussed possibly adding a separate line to the budget. So I did that just for the purposes of discussion and added a proposed fire vehicle maintenance line to the budget for this year. And I started it off with a number of $16,000, which the chief had listed out for us the sort of the recurring inspection fees and that sort of thing, and that totaled about $10,000. And then he mentioned that he had some other outstanding items, tires, I believe, were the big ticket items. So anyway, I think that'll be something for further discussion. But that was just while we're talking about the warrant articles, that was sort of my counter proposal that I think we can explore further.
I think that might be a better approach, honestly.
I mean, they do have they have $108,000 that was voted last year that's not going to go for its intended purpose, right? So
correct, and that's still sitting there. So I asked him about placing an article to return those funds back to capital, and he declined doing that because he was hoping that he could change the specifications for the project somewhat and put it back out to bid. Now, from a procurement standpoint, that's okay, but the specifications need to change enough to warrant going back out to bid. They can't be too similar to the initial bid. But that time, I don't know if you recall the discussion, but we only got one bid in. It was grossly over the 108,000, so much so that even if we had declined certain options, we never would be able to get that project done within $108,000. So I think he wants to leave that on the books for one more year and kind of see what he can figure out with that. But its intended purpose was pretty clear. So it would only be used for its intended purpose if he's able to adjust the specs and we go back out to bid and get a reasonable price.
Sure. And then lastly, from the fire department, we have a similar matching grant request that we've done in the past, most recently for the brush breaker. There's a 5% match for replacement fire hose. If the grant comes through, then some of the maintenance certification expense would not be needed any longer. So that's $5,000 for new fire hose.
Yes.
We've already discussed the next several articles. So the next item at number 31, new alarm systems for both the highway barn and for the library.
Yes, so we had those priced out and it will result in a little bit of savings on our insurance. How much of a savings I think is debatable. I don't know that they were asking us so much that they were telling us that this would be a good investment in our buildings, especially for the highway barn where it's kind of tucked away in back. If something happened there during off hours, I think it'd be a bit before anybody knew about it. So that seemed to be a worthwhile investment. That said, the $9,500 takes into account both of those buildings, library and highway, but it also, they do a thing, it's ADT that we're working with. They have the best pricing because we're already a customer of theirs for other alarm uses. They actually roll the first year of payments into the install fee, basically. But I do believe that there's a way to separate that out. At first, I was a little reluctant to have it all rolled in there because I know that you don't like articles going for something that could be like a recurring expense. But it's a special rate for the first year and they packaged it that way when they gave us the pricing. If you were looking for places to cut, I think we could live with $7,500 and then I could work within our utilities line or other expense lines possibly to see if we could absorb some of that cost into our operating budget. I'd be reluctant to cut much more than that though, because I'm not certain how it'll work out if we don't commit to doing the first year up front and some of that, if we'll get the same pricing. But that was the estimate for that.
And I said that ties, I'm sorry, that ties into the existing fiber optic network or is it a separate communication?
So that's actually, it ties into the existing, their Verizon phone lines. And it ties into them. We did look at trying to bring over the alarm system phone lines to the voice over IP and all of that. And it seemed like from a technology standpoint that just wasn't going to work for us. We tried doing something similar with our fax lines. And honestly, that was a nightmare. We ended up having to reinstate some of the phone lines, and faxes were going to different offices, and then they wanted everyone to change their fax number. So with the Verizon phone lines for the alarm system, I mean, I don't even think it's $10 a month. It's like a very, very low cost. So it seemed like just for everyone's sanity, that was the best approach.
Okay. Great.
The IT equipment upgrades, we did have an analysis done of our IT system, our equipment, software, and from a network standpoint. And aside from that, our IT person who services basically all the town departments except for the police department, we have a problem. One of our servers, it's actually the server, it's not the Exchange server that town email is on. That one's fairly up to date. It's the other server that houses all of the documents. It's out of date. We can no longer download required security updates for it. They're called security patches. I'm not much of a tech person, so that doesn't mean a lot to me, but they're not basically eligible for any sort of upgrades or routine maintenance, and they've become obsolete. So this would be to replace that document server and also to implement some of the recommendations that came in that technology assessment we had done. We did hire a third party, someone who's done a lot of work with municipalities and with the regional planning agency that services our area. And they came in and looked at everything and basically echoed the same thing as our IT person and said, this is where you're vulnerable, and encourage some different security updates. There are a few people running computer systems with a very outdated version of Windows that's not even really supported anymore. And just making sure that all of the operating systems have up-to-date security software on them, that the server's protected, upgrading our email filtering, and some different things like that. So it seems like we could get all of that accomplished for that 18,500 number. And that's not something that would be a recurring expense. The security software like antivirus stuff, that we would have to absorb in our utilities budget. But the cost for that, once you're upgraded and get it installed, is minimal. And then 40, that's for the bylaw codification to keep that up to date on the town's website. I checked in with Alan Wheelock and he said to go with the same number as this current year. And it looks like they've spent a good portion of the 3,500. I want to say that they maybe have a little over $500 left in that article. So that's good. And the bylaw codification system has worked well for us. We've heard nothing but good things from the town staff who use it, as well as the general public. You can just go on there and search for something, zoning bylaws, general bylaws, and it pops right up. So that's that one. And then the school resource officer article, I've been meaning to check in with Silver Lake just to find out why. When we were having some of the joint meetings with them a few months back, there was a lot of discussion about wanting to put the SRO into their operating budget. And we had left it with them that we were more or less fine either way, but that we felt like it belonged in the operating budget if it was going to keep coming up year after year. And that was what they were proposing, but then they, excuse me, said for whatever reason that this year they needed it to be in the form of an article again. So I can find out more background on that, but it's something that historically the townspeople have supported. So it's just that
If I
article.
could just chime in here for a little bit. Right now, we have about $9,500 left in that article from last year. We've spent almost $7,000. There was money carried over from the previous year. So that number would be able to be adjusted down. If they're looking for 14,000 in the article, that number might be able to be adjusted down.
To like
I can check
12,
that
12
with-
or so, or?
Maybe. I could check that with Christine Healy. Originally, we were expecting to see something for the tennis court as well. And we had already appropriated $41,140, I think, last year. And then she got back to me and said, no, based on the estimates, the amount we appropriated last year was sufficient. So there's nothing for the tennis court this year, but I can double check that number with her.
Yeah, because traditionally it's been a funny couple of years, but this year's been a full school year. And like I said, we're 3/4 of the way through the year and we've spent almost $7,000.
Okay. So that might be another spot then for some savings.
Okay. Alrighty, and then the last one is one that they originally raised last year, was to establish a stabilization fund for the regional school district. That I know, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think most of us were not in favor of that.
I think that caused some anxiety last year, but they did do a good job at one of the regional meetings that we had with them of explaining it. And once I heard their reasoning and kind of the background info, it really wasn't as sinister as I think everybody thought when it was initially proposed. Christine Joy was at that meeting with me, as was John Williamson. And I think all three of us were kind of like, okay, all right, like this might make good financial sense for the long term. But I'm happy to get more background information on it for everybody. They did mention, I think one of the things, if I'm not mistaken, that concerned people was no dollar amount associated with it at first. And I think people were a little like, well, is that a trick? Like, what is this? And they said that they did that because they didn't want people to become overly concerned. They simply wanted to establish it, kind of leave it alone for a year, and then start working with it and talking dollar amounts and everything. So maybe I can get some more information and clarification on this and get it back to you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions about the annual town meeting warrant articles? Any comments anyone would care to make? Okay. And the list of the special town meeting articles, and I think this is a complete list. Not everything has a dollar amount you can see so far.
Okay, so I have a few updates for that.
Okay,
So there are no unpaid bills from the prior year.
nice job, Lisa.
Right? OPEB, we wanted to do at the $10,000. And then at some point when all of the hoopla around town meeting kind of dies down, Lisa and I wanted to dig into OPEB a little bit more and kind of learn more about it and see if there was anything different we should be doing. The highway barn roof, the $7,850 is for that necessary, the additional strapping project.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to eliminate the police unanticipated retirements, which I'm still somewhat surprised by, but Lisa checked and they're pretty much on target in their salaries line for, where they need to be at this point in the fiscal year. And we've already paid out those retirements and everything. So I don't know if it's possibly because they didn't fill that position that Matt had applied for last year. I think they were having a hard time finding a full-time person and trying to navigate the new police reform law as far as who has to go to the academy. I think they were prioritizing all of our part-timers have to go through the Bridge Academy by a certain date in order to remain certified as a police officer. So I think they abandoned the plan to bring on anybody new until that's done, which that process should be complete within the next month or so. But in any event, we removed that article. Now the Taser lease, I did speak with the acting chief after you had posed your questions. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that or not, but I explained where the 16 tasers were going. I had no idea. I guess there's software associated with them that has to be continuously updated. And theirs are obsolete and expiring June 30th. So when I spoke with the acting chief today and he was telling me that, I said, so wait a minute, you actually need these funds before June 30th in this fiscal year. So that was the reason for moving that from ATM to STM. It's not going to be 5 payments of $10,528. It goes down dramatically in future years. And I did ask him to track down the breakdown for me, and I'm happy to send that around when I receive it. But basically for the next 4 years of it, they would just absorb those lease payments into their budget. And apparently it's a fraction of the $10,528 because they'll already have the tasers and the holsters and the some of the other components of it. And it's really more for the cartridges and kind of the guarantee that they'll replace it if anything happens. And it does also tie in with the police reform law. They have a whole use of force policy, and this being a non-lethal method of, potentially controlling a situation if need be. I do think it's important for them to have those tools available to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then we were also able to delete the OBRA article. That payment is not going to be due before the end of the fiscal. In the budget, though, I did add $4,750 for next fiscal year, I believe to the Medicare line, which is what Social Security and those types of things get paid from. But that one's gone.
Okay.
And we have unemployment. That's the number that we owe the state. And that is a concrete number as of yesterday. And then the retirement, that Social Security and Plymouth County retirement issue, that number can be reduced to $11,500. And that, what that is for, basically there was an employee who should have been having the required Plymouth County retirement deduction taken from their pay. For whatever reason, it was many years ago, prior to my time with the town and prior to the current staff's time with the town. When they were set up in the system, they were never set up for Plymouth County retirement. They were having some Social Security deductions taken, which I guess is problematic because they were no longer being factored in. I guess this person was already collecting Social Security. So very long story short, the way to rectify this and to rectify the town's error from many years ago is for us to make a lump sum payment to Plymouth County Retirement to make them whole again for this individual. And we did talk to legal counsel about this and everything to make sure that this was the way to go. And it seems like this is the best course of action. There are no other employees that this pertains to. So this is a one and done kind of thing. And then we should be in good shape. We also accepted enrollment into an OBRA program. So we're no longer going to be dealing with the Social Security deductions and things like that, which is what a majority of cities and towns in the Commonwealth do. So it should be a savings for us overall. And if you want specific numbers on the savings over the years, I do have that. I think it's at my office, though. It might be a paper copy, but I'm happy to send that around just so you can see. But that's what that's for in a nutshell.
Okay.
The copier leases, so this is to cover copy machines in multiple offices. And for whatever reason, we've had a problem. The leasing company that the copier payments go to, for whatever reason, they seem to bill on a strange cycle, and we are being overrun with late fees. And by right, legally speaking, a municipality shouldn't be paying late fees in instances like this. But it's becoming problematic. Sometimes they remove them from the accounts, then they add them back on. And it's not cheap. It's $75 a month just in these late charges. And it has to do with the timing in which we receive the invoice. Even if you put in the warrants to be paid right away, it takes time to get that turned over and then the check to be sent out. And we were talking with our vendor who does the copy machines, and these are all fairly new machines. And if we were to pay them off, and this 15,830, I expect it to come down a little bit. That was the payoff as of like a little while ago. So I think that that number will come down a little bit, but that would make it so that we own the machines outright. Our existing maintenance agreements with the vendor stay in place. But it would just be nice not to have those monthly payments plus dealing with them and all these late fees and trying to navigate that. And then we'd own nice new machines. And then professional services regarding the North Carver project. Mark may want to say a few words about that, but essentially we have some concerns about the project that's started up. I'm sure everybody's seen it and driven by that area. We were looking to have some funds available in the event that we wanted to hire professional services, whether it's somebody to take a look at how much water withdrawal they're planning from that site and how might that affect Plympton. And we do have quite a few residents who live right by there. So we could also look at other impacts too. But we thought that this would go a long way to have some professional help in making sure that, you know, the project isn't overly detrimental to us, or if something is going to be a problem, if we could identify that sooner rather than later and maybe use it as a point of negotiation or see where that takes us down the road.
Dr. Russo, anything to add, or you?
Here we go. I might just add a couple things. This comes out of concerns with Open Space Committee, Concom, concerned citizens, huge project, fairly large impact on Plympton and very little control. The hope is, and this is being explored, that maybe we can get the developer to pay for a fair amount of the studies that would be helpful to us. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. The kinds of studies, really technical studies that would be helpful on water usage and drainage and traffic and lighting could easily be 3 or 4 times this amount. But so amount was chosen that was moderate, that might give us a little bit of expertise as we plead our case along the way. And if this money isn't used, or especially if we get the developer to be paying for some of these studies, then obviously this money could go right back into our regular accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and then I noticed on yours, I'm just trying to compare mine with yours. We do have one to replenish the town building maintenance article. We had been doing 50,000. I mean, do I think it needs quite that much? Maybe not, but that article has kind of saved us with some of the problems that we've been plagued with at various town buildings over the last year. I think originally when we had added 50,000 to it at a prior town meeting, I think that was because we were in the height of COVID. I want to say that was the 2020 town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were coming into that planning process, we were spending a considerable amount of money on plexiglass, things for the offices, all kinds of stuff to make us kind of COVID compliant. Do I think we need a full 50,000? No, not necessarily, but I do think we need to fund it somewhat substantially, just to have that safety net. Like I said, we've had a lot of problems between mold issues and asbestos and even some larger scale stuff at the townhouse when they were conducting some of the roof sampling to make sure that there was nothing hazardous in that for our roof project. While they were up there were 2 spots where we had active leaks, and they were able to patch that and fix that while they were up there. And having this article in place is what facilitated being able to say, yeah, go ahead while the person's up there, have them fix it. So just kind of things like that. So I don't know what number you'd be looking for. I put the 50,000 in more as a placeholder and to see if we could afford it from existing funds and at the end of this year. And it looks like we could, not that you necessarily want to, but maybe even 40,000 and then kind of see where we're at. Initially, when COVID was first happening and all the expenses that came along with that, and then the County CARES Act, our former town accountant went and put the COVID account kind of in with the building maintenance, which I understand why she did that at the time, because even though they had approved deficit spending for municipalities during that, for a small town like ours, you don't want to deficit spend that much. So it was nice having it as kind of a sub-account within the building maintenance article. But then once the checks started coming in from the county for reimbursements, we were able to move that COVID account separately so that it would have all of its own bookkeeping. So I don't know that 50,000 is necessarily the number, but maybe 40,000 would be. And based on some of the budget lines and everything that currently seem to have a little bit of excess left in them that Lisa provided me with, it seems like we could afford to do that and kind of maintain that safety net, even if we maintained it for one more year, and then maybe at the following year's town meeting, picked a set amount and said, okay, each year we're only going to replenish it to get it up to X amount of dollars. But I think we want some sort of a safety net at least for one more year.
So are you saying it's totally gone now, or is there?
No, there's still some funds left in it.
Okay.
But I think keeping it, I want to say 1 year it was funded. I'd have to go back and look. At one point, I want to say there was 75,000 in it. It may have been that once we funded the 50 and kind of got that established, but I don't know, somewhere maybe 35 or 40,000, I think would be a nice safety net, just where we're finding all these problems with our buildings. Some of it's unforeseen. And if something comes up and we don't have the luxury of being like in this process for town meeting time and being able to propose articles, if it comes up mid-year, there are some repairs, unfortunately, that you can't really put off. And some of them could be large scale, that it would be detrimental for us as far as a reserve fund transfer. Like you don't want to do those too soon into a fiscal year.
Right.
And then not have anything left over. So I think that this makes good sense from a building maintenance standpoint to have these funds available. And we don't use them for small scale stuff. Like we will not nickel and dime that article. That stuff, we have the little $5,000-ish budget line under custodial. Like if somebody needs keys made or something like that.
Yeah.
These are for bigger things.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about the special articles?
So Nate, you'll add a line with that new article?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the school committee does have their placeholder in. It's going to be the standard format. It's like the chart.
Yep.
With each line. And I know that they have a few things they need to move around, but they were still refining some of the numbers.
Okay. So that fund you just, the townhouse fund, that'll be on the special, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, most of those special articles, Nate, will be covered with funds from other budget lines.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the budget. All right. So what I had done was I basically took anything that I thought was relatively innocuous or kind of a standard increase and moved it over to the recommended side. FinCom has not formally voted on any of these things, but just strictly for kind of purposes of discussion, I went ahead and sort of cut and pasted a lot of what we have here. There are some lines that you'll see that I highlighted, just that I think we need to discuss a little further. So I will, if anyone has any questions or comments about any of these items that I'm not going to address, please feel free to interrupt and ask any questions or make comments as you see fit. So the first one that I identified was the group health line, which I know we talk about every year, and we always seem to be overfunding every year. So the request was for a 6% increase. Looking at what the expenditure is so far year to date, it looks like we're on target to spend about $450 this current fiscal year. So I didn't think that we needed to set aside $530 for that. So I proposed perhaps $500, which would still be more than a 10% increase over current fiscal expenditure. So
they said that there was, the estimate that they gave us was a little bit high, and they said it was because of COVID claims.
But we're not self-insured, right?
We're part of the Mayflower Municipal Health Group. We're not self-insured for those particular, for the group health premiums.
Right. So if the insurance company is paying out more money, that's not our problem.
Right. They set the rates for the entire, like for Mayflower, like the network itself. Mm-hmm. So they told the municipalities to plan on anywhere, I believe it was between a 4.5% and a 6% increase. But if you want to go a little bit lower with that, and we can see if we can get more up-to-date clarification. It was a while ago that we had checked in with them on that.
Okay.
I actually think, Liz, at the very last that I've heard, they're saying a 3% increase.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that number.
Yeah, I think I just recently talked to Christine.
Okay, because she had left it with me 4.5 to 6 and said hopefully 4.5, but yeah, we can check on that. If you want to put it in at a 3 for now.
I'm already at 10 from where I sit, so.
Okay.
So moving on, the next item that I wanted to get a little clarification on was the conservation agent. You know, a 40% increase. And I believe the note that you had attached there was he's being used for more purposes.
Correct, but I just wanted to pull up their request. Okay, so normally we were paying him for 12 hours a week. And then the additional hours he's working, Conservation Commission is supplementing him through their NOI fund. Because they're utilizing him for more than 12 hours a week. What this would do, now he's also taken on the work for Open Space Committee, and he's also assisting them with administering various grant programs. So what they're looking to do is bring him up to 16 hours a week on the town's payroll. So it would be an increase of 4 hours a week. And they are proposing for him a 3% COLA and a merit raise as well. So when it comes out, I want to say, and I'm just trying to see here. It looks like, sorry, my screen's really small. So with the COLA and the merit raise, it's a 97-cent an hour raise. And they're looking to increase him by 4 hours a week so that he can provide service to Open Space Committee and everything else. They want to be cautious too about depleting their NOI fund because they do rely on that sometimes if they need to hire a specialized consultant, if it's like a particular project that they need planning or engineering expertise. But so far he's been averaging more hours than the 12, but like I said, they've been supplementing it. So they want a reliable 16 hours a week for this person.
Now, when this person was originally proposed a few years ago, the intent was that some of these fees for the agent were going to be recouped from application fees and such, you know, building permit fees and whatnot. Has that happened? Do you know? In other words, the job was originally presented to us as something that would not really pay for itself, but in essence would pay for itself.
I mean, theoretically, they could afford somebody for a few hours a week if they only paid the person from the NOI fund, like the filing fees. Typically with DEP filing fees, I want to say the town gets half plus $12.50 and Mass DEP gets half minus $12.50, or at least that's the way it was when I used to do conservation stuff years and years ago. But they are a very busy commission. That's the thing. They have several large scale projects going on. And at any particular time during the year, if you check in with them, they are a very busy committee. And They are doing important work. They're kind of on the front lines as far as making decisions about projects that could really affect water quality and things like that. And I know that the individual who's in this position, he enjoys working with the town and everything, but he is quite capable. And I do think that there's a bit of fear of losing him if he were to go somewhere else with more reliable hours. So I think they talked with him and they felt like if they could offer a consistent 16 hours a week, that would be ideal and that would be enough to kind of get it done and keep him. He really knows the town inside and out. And like I said, he's taken a very active role with helping them administer some different grant programs. They're actually in the midst of applying for another grant right now involving the Winnetoxet and the MVP program. So I don't know. I mean, I know it's a large increase when you're looking at it from your perspective, and I'm not downplaying that at all. I know that there are a lot of big increases being proposed in this budget. I just kind of want to go on record and say, I think in this instance, for the 4 hours a week for this person, I think it's money well spent, just given our situation with having to be mindful of our water quality and environmental impacts for projects.
Nate, might I just underscore that? Sorry to jump in here, but this is a really good guy and he really does like the town. He's learning, he's growing quickly. Concom in particular is on the edge of being overwhelmed with new projects. This is a guy who probably over time can be really helpful with grants along the way. And if it hasn't happened yet, I think he's going to save us money in the long run.
Great, thank you. Next item you'll see I have highlighted is the support staff, and I know you attached a note to this one as well, but for the rest of the committee that maybe hadn't had a chance to see the note, this is basically the person that we've been receiving on a grant for the past few years, and now the grant has expired. Is that correct? And we need
yes, so it expires, I believe, in October. It's through Citizens for Citizens, and they've been supplying us with a person to handle all of the COA. She does all of the clerical work. She's also the main point of contact for the food pantry. She does all of the outreach for like the calls to the seniors and helps the COA director with planning various events. She's kind of the main point of contact in that office. So the funding for her expires in October, and we were looking at bringing her in under wage and personnel. And I don't, let me see. Oh, yeah, okay, I do have the math here. Okay, so the grant ends in October. It's been paid for 4 years now by Citizens for Citizens. We want to bring her in just as a basic clerk, so not as an administrative assistant or anything like that. And we wanted to do $16 an hour. And okay, so the grant expires October 1. So beginning October 1, we wanted to bring her on board for $16 an hour, 20 hours a week. And that would be for roughly 39 weeks in this coming fiscal year that we would be paying for her. She's a retiree, so she's all set as far as insurance goes. So there's really no added cost in that regard. And the cost for her specifically would be $12,480 to pay her from October 1 through June 30th. Then the additional in there is for the COA driver, who is full-time salaried, and that only includes him getting just a 3% COLA. So it's Jim doing what he's been doing at the 3% COLA, plus $12,480 so that we can keep Jean Pacheco for the rest of the fiscal year. Obviously, the following year, assuming that she wants to stick around, then we would be picking up a full year. But the grant does go through until October.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the rest of the committee on any of the other items under general government? Okay. The assessors, nothing really jumped out at me. I don't know if any of the committee had any. I think they explained themselves when they came before us. Okay. Town clerk budget. I highlighted the increase in salary only because it was not consistent with what other departments had put in. I didn't know if we wanted to accept the proposal or bring it down to more in line with the 3% that other departments have had, especially in light of the fact that the clerk did get a 18 or 19% increase just a couple of years ago. So I know at the time she made the presentation, she said that she was considering it as something of a retention bonus, if you will, for being on the job for a certain number of years. And I think we could say that we paid that already. So those are my initial thoughts. Just throw that out there. I don't know if anyone else has any comments. If not, we'll move on.
Well, I have a question. What year did she get all of her qualifications and therefore an additional $1,000?
We paid this certificate in fiscal 22.
Okay.
So just recently.
All right. So I don't see why it should be up here, up 5% this year then.
Okay.
Unless she's considering COLA plus merit. 3 and 2.
Do you know, Liz?
I was on the call when you had her come in, and I think at first she said something to the effect of a longevity. There are other department heads who are, say, as a matter of contract negotiations or whatever it may be, who are getting a 3% COLA plus a 2% merit. But I think she mentioned something about longevity.
Yeah, the way I'm trying to read it, it's kind of small here. Bear with me. The way she worded it in her submission was a 3% COLA plus a 2% 10-year step. And that was the first I had heard of anybody being granted a 10-year step. And I didn't know if we had anything in wage and personnel. And I realize this is not a wage and personnel position, but we do tend to follow their guidelines, across the board. Do we have any such thing that anyone's aware of, any sort of a longevity step?
I've never heard of it.
No, just the teachers have steps.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if everyone is in agreement, then I'll adjust that to a 3%. Our meeting when it gets held. Town clerk support staff. Again, I don't, and I was hoping that somebody else might recall perhaps what was being proposed there for.
Does it have to do with upcoming elections?
No, I didn't. No, because that's a separate line.
That's another one,
That's
yeah.
further down. I thought it was so that they could have coverage. So again, she's got it broken down in the submission as 15 hours a week for one person, and then an additional 5 hours a week for a different person at a different rate of pay. And then this two other lines. I mean, it's fairly well broken down. I just didn't quite remember all the specifics of it. It is itemized. There were specifics for special projects, for support staff, for the census, and 30 hours while the other two folks are out of the office attending conferences. So, and then there's a line that says assistant town clerk education, $1,200 approximately for 48 hours of a conference via Zoom. And that kind of confused me as well. If we're already paying her a salary, why do we have to pay her a second time to attend a conference? Wouldn't that be part of her work week? Okay. Anyway, I think we need to get a little bit more clarity on that line. So I will reach out for that. You can see down here, Marilyn, this line here. Yeah, is due to the, you can see it fluctuates pretty much every other year based on the election cycle. Okay. So we'll address those perhaps later. The accountant treasurer office, again, nothing really jumped out at me. I don't know, Liz, because you put this comment here. I don't know if you want to speak to that about.
Sure. So that's for where we joined OBRA. There are, I believe, 4 annual payments we need to make of $4,750 a piece. But once we've done that, it is a considerable savings that we'll realize. And this was the one that I took away the special town meeting article because we realized we don't owe anything yet. But when I spoke with the treasurer collector, and now this is refreshing my memory, I had initially added the $4,750 to the Medicare line, but then took it out of there because she said, for her purposes in paying the invoice to Voya, which is the company that's managing this, it's easier if it's in her expense line. So I went back manually and adjusted her request by $4,750.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. Any questions on this section? Great, moving along to the selectmen line. Again, nothing really jumped out other than if you want to, someone wants to speak to the admin, the job description has been updated and refreshed, which is one.
Sure. So we updated the job description for the position. The original description was fairly outdated in that it didn't take into consideration that you have a town administrator. So it was from many years ago. And I don't know if you recall or not, but we did discuss this briefly last year. We had wanted to get her to the top step for fiscal 22, but we did it in 2 years. So last year, we kind of brought her halfway up. And, you know, I don't know if anybody recalls this, but in the discussions, I said, we're going to bring her the rest of the way for fiscal 23. It's not the top step of what will be the top step after town meeting for fiscal 23. It's the top step for fiscal 22. So it'll be just under the top step once the new wage and classification chart gets approved. So just under there. And basically, over the years, in particular the last 2 years, this position has taken on, I would say, more of an insurance advisory and also kind of a quasi building maintenance role. It's sort of become a jack of all trades position. And as part of that, she is managing all of our different insurance policies. So anything from the insurance on the various town buildings that she's working with, everything from that to like workers' compensation claims. So we added all of that to the job description, made them formal duties of the position. She's also has taken over all of the RMV processing, which saves a lot of time in particular for our police and fire departments. You know, year to year, if there are new vehicles coming online or any insurance claims with anything, she's completing those forms. She has a contact at the RMV. She's handling all of that. In addition to numerous other duties that were not originally part of the job description. I'm happy to send around the updated job description if you're interested in seeing it, but we did properly file it with the Wage and Personnel Board just very recently. So it's been kind of a work in progress over the last year plus, and this will make her whole and get her kind of on a level playing field too with other administrative assistants in the building based on her workload. And so I think that this is fair and it's been a long time coming.
Sure. Great, thank you. So I think most of the other lines are kind of standard increases. The custodian added responsibilities is so adding a couple more hours a week to his.
Yes, it's 3 extra hours a week for him.
The only one I wanted to discuss, and I think, Liz, you and I had talked about it at one point, you may not recall. We did get a request from, I believe it was Board of Health after they had made their original presentation. They put in sort of an addendum for a Zoom account. They wanted to have their own Zoom account. And I think you and I had discussed perhaps at one point, maybe getting a second account for the town for some of the smaller committees that don't meet as frequently. So I don't know if that's something that you would feel, I mean, it's $150. I don't know if it's something you'd feel comfortable absorbing into one of your existing expense budgets here, or if we should add it in. They had requested $250, but I know from, you know, personal experience, it's not that much.
They just renewed the one for the selectmen's account and it just went to my credit card. Yeah, it's like $159, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, we can absorb that. Maybe we could find out which department thought they'd use it the most. And if one of them is willing to sign up for it, we could get them reimbursed through one of these budget lines, maybe even utilities or something. I can find a logical place to take that out of. And then we could have maybe a shared password or something where the smaller groups, because I know some of the smaller committees, they were using like Zoom personal accounts,
Right.
but that's not the best if you do end up with a lot of attendees. I think it caps the attendees and it caps the amount of time.
Right, it's only 45 minutes and I forget the number of attendees. But.
Right. So we can make that happen. That's fine.
Okay. All right, great. And I wasn't even sure if you know, if like a second line, like, you know, when you get a cell phone, a second line is cheaper. If, you know, if a second Zoom account is, if there's a discount for a multiple or something like that. But so, all right, good. I'll respond back to them and we'll handle it elsewhere.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, moving along. Yeah, so again, Board of Health, and I felt comfortable putting the $3 down for the stipend, but the other two I wasn't quite so certain about. So,
So there, I will say about them, and I don't like to speak for elected boards other than the selectmen, but the staff in there, so you have Kathy Ferguson, she's like the main point of contact for that office. And then they have the health agent. And both of those people have gone above and beyond, and not just with COVID, but during COVID in particular. Kathy was working 7 days a week, outside of her normal hours that she was being paid for, keeping everyone apprised of what was going on with the COVID counts and everything. But even now that some of that has died down a little bit, something I think you should be aware of, they have ended their trial program with the fire department. The fire department was providing certain services for them, monitoring the Maven system, where the state sends out all of the infectious disease information. And now that is falling onto Kathy and Kevin, the health agent. It's taking up an enormous amount of time. And basically, it's one of those things where you might go a few days that there's nothing new in Maven, and it's just the normal day-to-day job duties. But then sometimes they'll input like 5 or 6 things, and there's all these follow-up actions that are associated with it, depending on what it is. Is it COVID? Is it a tick-borne illness? Is it a mosquito-borne illness? I think people would be surprised the amount of work entailed in that, and the amount of reporting and legal requirements that are placed on our Board of Health. So the support staff line, I know percentage-wise, it's a big increase, but it's not just for, so Kathy's obviously like a set rate and everything, and I'm sure that they discussed that with you. I think I was on that call when they made their presentation, but for the health agent, there's a little bit of padding in there because he's more or less on call. He's been called a lot lately with everything going on. But there is a chance that they won't utilize that full amount. But I think it's
so there's no increase
on them.
There's no increase as far as you know in the number of hours that Kathy works. I mean, there's no proposal to increase her hours.
There was a proposal. I want to say it was for a couple hours a week. I could be mistaken. I was on the call when they came and presented. And I believe hers was for the, excuse me, 3% COLA. And I don't know if they included a 2% merit. If
well,
not,
the way they
because
described it actually is 3% COLA and moving to top step, which if I did the math correctly, that works out to a 26.5% increase. So it's certainly.
Okay, then maybe they just meant moving her to the top step. If they did that, it would be the fiscal 22 step. So it would be in line with where Bridget is moving to. I don't know. I mean, that's, you know, if you want them to clarify further, I definitely reach out. But honestly, all throughout the pandemic, I mean, I was getting messages from Kathy on Friday nights, Sunday mornings, like she was and kept coming to the office to check the facts and doing all of that stuff. I don't know that they presented it to you in that manner, but it might be for a couple extra hours a week too. I think that they're going to need it now that they've taken back all those responsibilities. It didn't work out with the fire department, so they formally severed that relationship.
Okay. They also submitted a line for legal expenses. Now, wouldn't that come out of the general legal budget?
So that can come out of our general legal budget. I would check in with them though, because after they submitted their budget request and met with you, a couple things happened with severing that relationship with the fire department. They also have the need to bring a public health nurse on board, not for many hours, you know, maybe a few hours a month here and there to meet some of the reporting requirements.
Yeah, they've got that listed as They've got that listed as a separate line for VNA Cape Cod Health Services. For
Okay, is that in there? Because I just didn't
Yeah.
want to see if they, kind of like swapping legal for that. But we can cover their legal out of that's where we've been paying it out of all along.
That's what I thought. And similarly, isn't the copier one of the copiers that we discussed previously? So
Yeah.
we can eliminate that line as well.
That might actually, you know what, I may stand corrected. I don't have my notes in front of me on the copier, but hold on, I can pull it up. It might not be theirs because they had entered into their own thing, but let me I have it specific in the warrant. I just want to give you accurate information. Let me just look. Nope, it's not their copier. They still need that. It's for the main machine in the treasurer tax collector's office, which is also utilized by the selectman's office and myself. It's also for the copier in the town clerk's office and the copier in the council on aging office. So those 3 offices. And you may still see something in the town clerk's line. She has a very inexpensive maintenance contract for hers. And the plan was for paying these off. We want to keep the maintenance agreements because I think it's relatively cheap. It might be $100 or $200 a year. And you can call them as many times as you need to for any issues.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I will get some clarification on those 2 lines and remove the legal expenses and such and try to.
Okay, and you're going to reach out to the town clerk for clarification on her items as well?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Public Works, Highway, I think the largest change was the labor line, and that was, we consolidated or absorbed the Parks Department, but also, and Rob, I don't know if you want to speak to this again, you proposed adding an additional laborer, I believe.
Correct, I did. We're kind of behind the ball. We could use the extra help. We have the equipment in the wintertime for snow removal, and we're paying subcontractors to do some of the stuff we could do.
Sure.
During the year, it's, if you put guys out on the road, you want to put 2 together. It's a safety hazard to put 1 out. If a guy gets hit by a car and the car drives off, he's out there. I have 3 guys, so to make 2 crews of 2 to make it work, you kind of need the 4th person.
Yep. Makes sense. And administrative assistant, that's a pretty sizable jump there too. What save me from looking it up.
It got cut from its original description of 15 hours to 10 a couple of years back. I'm trying to bring it back to what the job was originally. The job description required was a minimum of 15 hours.
It was the hours, but it was also, sorry, Rob, I'm just kind of jumping in because I was on the call when we discussed it last time. She's also taking on the grant project for looking at the transfer station operations and kind of figuring out how to keep that sustainable for the next few years. They're looking at various alternatives, everything from keeping it status quo to looking at pay as you throw. So could use some hours for that, but it was also for increased sticker sales. We actually, and I could pull up the email. I feel like we discussed this last time though, so I'm sorry, I don't have the notes in front of me, but I want to say that there were extra hours brought on the weekends during sticker time. And we had said the way that they broke it out in their budget request, it was actually kind of nice. It had it if you maintained a steady number of hours all year, or if you allowed them to have the administrative assistant work extra during sticker time. And when we had talked about it last time, I think we all sort of agreed that it made sense to have those extra hours available.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about highway department? Okay. Animal and tree, I think we covered pretty well during that discussion. Building department, I know there was the major increases is for the zoning administrator. I don't know if anybody on this board of selectmen or Liz, if you want to speak to, basically they just
We've had
responsibilities.
Yes, it's been a large shift in the amount of responsibilities. Also kind of an increased demand for these services, in particular from our bylaw review committee, who have spent a tremendous amount of time trying to get all of our bylaws up to par. There were some concerns in the past about the level of enforcement of those bylaws. And, really kind of seeing boots on the ground and someone out there on a regular basis, being more proactive as opposed to reactive. So that seems to be, I know it's a sizable increase, but that would help tremendously as far as working through some of those issues. And then their department expenses, they did need some extra to handle, and I don't see my comment anymore, but I think I had put, they're doing mailings.
Newspaper ads, I think is what you would say.
Yes.
They had to publish.
So everything's gone up. The postage for the certified mailings and the newspaper ads and everything. So that's what that was for.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Next section is fire. There have been several revisions made. We talked a little bit about it earlier with my thoughts on perhaps, if when the chief was in a few weeks ago, we had the discussion about, he was saying how he thought that the equipment and repair line was underfunded, and he mentioned, the fact that he has several pump tests, annual pump tests and certifications, and obviously vehicle inspections and recertifications and all of those types of things, and oil changes and whatnot. And pretty much everything he was describing to me seemed like an annual expense that should be fairly predictable. So we had asked him to outline that, and that way we would have a better handle for budgeting purposes on what we were looking at. And he did do that for us and outlined. It came to, and I don't know if all of you were copied on the email or not, but basically he itemized everything, saying pump and chassis inspections about $6,500, ladder testing's about $500, vehicle inspections was about $1,000. So his subtotal was $8,000 approximately. And then he had an additional line for hose testing, which again, depending on the status of that grant, may or may not be in play for this coming year. So the total was approximately $10,000, $10,500, if you will, for kind of an annual inspections, recertification sort of thing. So again, to my mind, if we fund it somewhere in the $12,000 to $15,000 or $16,000 range, that gives him enough money to do his annual recertifications, and it also gives him a little bit of a cushion if there's a minor repair that needs to come up specifically for the vehicles. And this would be separate from line 515 for equipment and repair, which I think, again, to me, some of the, he mentioned, I think, chainsaws when he was on with us before, getting those either replaced or repaired, that sort of thing. So I'll open it up for discussion. I don't know whether we need to fund, again, I threw out a number of 16,000 for my new proposed line for the vehicle maintenance. I don't know if we do that. I don't know that we need to give the full 20 for the existing small equipment, if you will. maintenance and repair line, or if we want to adjust that down to maybe 15 and put them both at 15, or if we want to just go ahead and give the chief what he's looking for. So I'll stop talking at this point, and I'll let others weigh in. Or not.
Yeah, I was Nate. I was just looking over that breakdown that the chief had been able to send us, and it looks like fiscal year 22 to date spent roughly 31. Okay, so I think I kind of agree with you. I just always want to see more of a breakdown, and especially with mechanical things. I know there are surprises that come up, but there. You know, as an example, the tires that he brought up recently, I know they're extremely expensive, but unless there's an insurance or some other requirement to change them, tires are date coded. So you know automatically when they're going to expire if they're sitting. So it's a predictable expense unless there's something else. So then I'm always just wondering what is going on in the inspections and such that something like that would be a surprise. So anything like that we can do to mitigate surprises just through maybe more rigorous inspection or maybe more predictability, I would be in favor of.
Yeah, and I think we're all on the same page that the chief has done a great job of raising the level of performance in that building in other department, and he certainly was starting off with several factors working against him. So I will commend him for all that he has done. But to your point, Mike, I think to me, replacing tires on a fire truck should be a somewhat predictable expense that we could fund as a warrant article if we needed to, as opposed to trying to take it out of a budget line. But ongoing, oil changes and that sort of thing to me is kind of something that we can put in a budget. So that's sort of my thoughts. Marilyn or Steve or Catherine, any comments?
No.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. We all agree. Oh, I agree. I should say. I shouldn't say we.
Any of the selectmen care to weigh in, or Steve? I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, nothing much to add. I mean, if the only time you would not be able to anticipate that expense is when you come in new, and about your first year, and after that, you should have it zoomed in on.
Well, and I think we all understand that there are always going to be, well, hopefully not, but there's the potential for a catastrophic event that we had, a few years ago. We had the pump failure, and we had to approve a reserve fund transfer to get the pump back online. And I think we all understand that that's part of the deal, and that's why we have a reserve fund. So, yeah. Christine or Mark, any thoughts?
I like your thinking.
Okay.
I'm on the same page with you guys.
All right. So then just backing up a couple of lines there, the salary line, we've been going back and forth. He had asked for a 20% increase, and I don't think any of us felt that was feasible, especially when he said he wasn't changing staffing levels at all. So it just didn't add up to me. So I know Liz has gone back and forth, and I proposed a different number than she did. So I think that's something that we it appears as though that that there is an additional administrative person, which was exactly my fear when the salary line was proposed. And I really don't think that a department of 5 people needs 2 administrators full-time. So that is sort of how I arrived at my proposed number of 572, which, as you can see, still represents a 10% increase. I think we need to, and I'm willing to discuss it further, but I really think we need to put some pressure to have better oversight of scheduling and personnel matters over there personally. Alrighty then, we'll move to the other side of the parking lot. And,
Nate,
yes.
can I make a request that you go back to animal control
Oh, sure. Yeah,
before you move on?
of course. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay.
So the additional, the 3,200, Mark and I had been talking with the animal inspector and actually with a representative from the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. And apparently they reached out to the town and they were expressing some concerns with the lack of resources for that position, given the number of barn inspections that we have. So then we reached out to our animal inspector and he agreed with that assessment and said, yeah, it's not really reasonable for him to be conducting the number of inspections that are involved for the 1,875 per year. We asked him what he could reasonably do it in, factoring in, you know, he doesn't put in for mileage or anything like that. So it's just the flat rate that he's paid. It gets broken down monthly. So factoring in mileage, wear and tear on his vehicle, time spent. A lot of the barn inspections too require multiple follow-ups. If he goes out there and the people aren't home and he can't get in, or for a while during COVID, people wouldn't let him come and inspect and things like that. He felt like he could reasonably get it done, and to be fair to the town, for $3,200 a year. And then we went back to MDR and said, okay, would this prove us basically as allocating proper resources? And everybody seemed comfortable with that number. So that was how we got there. We are still experiencing a savings, not as large as before when animal inspector was only 1,875, but we do save money with the animal control side of things since making the arrangement with Carver. But now obviously the 3,200 is eating into that savings a little bit. So that's
Liz,
what that's for.
no expenses? They don't have any expenses?
Nope. So the animal inspector, he gets paid, like I said, just that flat rate. And it gets broken up throughout the year. Excuse me. Animal control, we used to have a separate expense line for them that they would put in for if they needed supplies. But part of the arrangement with Carver now, they handle all of that.
Great.
And then we do have a few police officers who do have special designations also as animal control. I believe Nate Christofori is one of them. And, you know, so if Carver wasn't available or something, we do have people within our police department who are somewhat trained in that area that can step up.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that. And Nate, going back, thank you.
Sure, no trouble. Sorry about that.
Nate, for the fire vehicle maintenance line,
Yes.
if you're going to create that, is that something that you'd be comfortable voting tonight, just so that I could remove it from the warrant and let the chief know? It's just kind of one less thing for us to have to pass over at town meeting, where nothing's gone to print.
Sure.
Nothing formal has happened. I think if we wanted to tell the chief that we're recommending that be withdrawn, it might be better to do that now rather than raise concerns for town meeting.
Sure, you can text him that right now, absolutely.
Okay.
I will
I'll remove it from the warrant if that's okay with people, subject to me letting him know that that's the recommendation.
Yeah, would someone in the FinCom like to make a motion to create budget line number 520 for fire vehicle maintenance?
Move to create budget line 520 for fire vehicle maintenance.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Steve. Marilyn? I'll do a roll call vote. Marilyn Brown,
Yes.
Steve Lewis,
Aye.
Mike Lemieux,
Aye.
Catherine Shepard,
Aye.
Nathaniel Sides, aye. Okay, thank you. All righty, moving on to the police. Again, the only line item that I think was up for discussion was the salary line. This committee felt as though that we had fully funded an additional officer last year, so that there should not be a need for a further officer to be added to the payroll. As Liz mentioned previously, they haven't staffed it yet, even though it was funded this past year. So I removed $75,000, which is what we had added in last year, from their request, which is how I arrived at this number here. And you can see it matches up pretty well with our COLA increase that we're authorizing for other departments. Again, that's just my way of thinking to sort of start the discussion for this evening. I'm open to restoring it if the committee wishes to do so, or we can meet them halfway or however. So I don't know if anyone else would care to weigh in.
I would tend to agree with you.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see a year with them actually being fully staffed before they ask for yet another officer.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, when he made the presentation, when the chief made the presentation, admittedly it was his first go around, and he was still relatively new as the interim chief at that point. They were talking about patrol officer number 7 and patrol officer number 8, but they only have 5 currently. Right. So how did we get to 7 and 8 from 5? So I agree. I think it would be nice to. I think we felt bad when we couldn't add when Chief Clancy originally requested it a couple of years ago. We had it in there originally, and then we removed it during COVID. And then I think we were pretty proud of ourselves. We put it back in last year. So I agree. I think it'd be helpful to see what they can accomplish with the fully funded staff. And then Liz, you had a comment in there that the DARE line caused confusion. Really?
So I don't know if you recall this or not, but Matt took it out last year and added it somewhere else in their expense budget. And then somebody raised a concern somewhere. I don't recall if it was at town meeting, like on the floor, or if it was in some other forum, either a selectmen's meeting or something, but people were like, oh gosh, you're getting rid of the DARE program. And it was like, no, it's in their expense budget. So for this year, they just opted to put it back so that it's specific and people can see that we still have a DARE program.
I'll just delete that line before I send it to the printers. Problem solved.
Well, there's that.
It did. You're right. It did come up on it. Someone did question it at a town meeting. You're
yes.
Right. Do we, so I'm sorry, any other questions about police before we move along?
I was just going to ask Liz if she knows where we are with that budget line this year.
For DARE?
No, for police services.
So they're actually doing remarkably well. They seem to be pretty much on target. Originally, we thought we'd need an article on the special to cover some of those unanticipated departures from the department, people that we've had to pay. But it seems like they're still right on target, even though those funds have come from that line, probably because they haven't fully staffed that vacant position. But so far, so good. Lisa's doing a fantastic job kind of keeping an eye on all of this stuff monthly and making sure that department heads are aware of what's going on and that I know what's going on. And so far, so good.
Does the 2.9% increase that FinCom is recommending cover our contractual agreement with them?
I thought with them we were 3, 2.5, 3. So I don't know if you want to add a few dollars to it to make it come out to an even 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or we may have been 2.5, 3, 2.5.
I can't remember what we negotiated.
The contract.
Either way, we should go to 3% is what is.
I would go to an even 3 if you have to add $10 to it or whatever.
That makes perfect sense. I'll go ahead and do that. We can call it DARE money.
There you go. I dare you.
Any further progress on the rock contract?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
Are we gonna like it?
To be determined. We got all of the data back from them, and it's really disturbing. I can forward the numbers to you, but as we suspected, there is a major glitch in the way that they are counting our calls. We were told a while back that they counted anything that required an action of the dispatcher. And they are counting calls in our volume for items that never cross the dispatcher's console. Anything simple from when an officer comes on duty, they have to do a required thing where they just take a look at the cruiser. It's like a pre-check-in inspection. And then they log into the laptop in the cruiser, into the system, and they just put, cruiser such and such, like okay, and their initials. That doesn't go to dispatch, but it does create a log entry. And they're counting things like that in our call volume. When you extrapolate that out and consider what they're charging us on average per call, if you look at the assessment and everything, when you back the numbers out, it looks like they owe us money, which I understand from a reasonable standpoint. We are paying for above and beyond just the answering of the calls. I mean, they have the facility, there's software. It was kind of being more sarcastic than anything, but I don't see that they make a valid argument for us paying one more penny above $150,000. So the chief and I are meeting with them early next week. And I think that we need to have a difficult conversation and consider taking a hard line and saying, no, like this is what we can afford for fiscal 23. And then we want to give you a year and us a year to really dive into some of these numbers and look at what you're doing for other towns and maybe make a more fair assessment for fiscal 24. But I don't know that in its current form, the draft contract is for 2 years, $200,000 each year. And I don't see how we would be in a position to want to sign something like that. If they wanted to give us a 2-year contract for $150 to stay at $150 for each year, then yeah, that would be fine. But I think at this point, unless something major comes up in our discussion with them next week, I'm thinking that the official response, and obviously I have to circle back with the selectmen and everything, but I think that the official response should be something more or less, 150,000 seems to be the number for fiscal 23. And we'd like to do a 1-year contract and evaluate all of our options, and you can refine your numbers, and then we'll have a new discussion about 24. And ideally a discussion well in advance of our budgeting process. I was a little taken aback when the timing that they sent it to us, and then with the $50,000 increase, it didn't give us much time at all to kind of digest that number. And so I don't know, that's my view of it, kind of unofficially. Obviously, I have to go back with the selectmen and see officially what they think and how they want us to officially respond.
Sure.
But unofficially, the chief and I want to indicate to them that this would cause a financial hardship for our town. It's incredibly short notice, and quite frankly, the math doesn't support it.
Yeah, and speaking for myself, but I'm pretty comfortable speaking for the rest of the committee as well. I think you described it pretty succinctly and how we feel as well. I mean, I know I sat in on the meeting a couple of years ago when they made the original presentation, and they promised us that once Hanover signed on board, our fee was going to drop precipitously, and obviously it didn't happen. And their numbers didn't add up 2 years ago, and they haven't gotten any better. So I think, again, they're all adults, they can weigh in for themselves, but I think I'm pretty comfortable in saying FinCom supports your efforts and would agree with your approach 100%.
Well, that's just it. And I don't want to sound like I'm being negative towards the arrangement. I think it's been a fantastic arrangement for the town. I think that they provide amazing service. No complaints about their service. The personnel they have all seem to be very capable, qualified people. It's not a knock on their services whatsoever. I just think that the math needs to be refined. And if they're doing this within a range, like looking at call volume, for example, they need to make an exception or maybe create a new range for a town as small as ours. So it comes down to dollars and cents. But I will say from a service perspective, they do provide an amazing service to the town. And I don't want that to get lost in this discussion. They're all great people doing great work, but it has to be affordable for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Veterans, no change, or not a significant change. The veterans agent got a living. Everything else was level funded. Library, I think Mr. Slauson, when he was in, made his presentation, very well as far as the expense side, the support staff. He is adding a couple of extra hours there. But again, nothing really jumped out at me there. Oh shoot, I meant to ask John something, but any questions about anything else up to this point before we touch on schools? Okay. School costs generally going down. There was the local school, they had added I'm calling it a vice principal because that's what the job description seemed to be to me. But they had put it under the special education line. And my question about that, and I'll have to get an answer from John, was there a reason it was specifically listed under special ed? And I don't know, Liz, if you know this answer or not. I don't know if by putting it under that classification, if it opens us up to be eligible for grants in some way, or not. Again, to me, reading the job description, it sounds to me more like it's a principal position. It's not specifically geared towards special ed. So
I want to say that they envision it being more of a guidance counselor type role. So I do believe it is more, I'm not sure how it came across necessarily to people during their presentation, but it's always been explained to me that this is for basically mental support services for the students, similar to like a guidance counselor or an adjustment counselor, to deal with the whole myriad of issues that they're seeing now, some of which are probably due to the pandemic. But it was always represented to me as more of a guidance counselor-ish type role. So I would believe that's why they put it under there.
Okay, that's helpful. So I don't know if anybody else on the committee has any questions. You know, again, I think they you know, they made a pretty, as they always do, made a pretty thorough presentation. And then the regional costs are actually going down due to, you know, temporarily, of course, due to our school enrollment going down. So. Okay. And the rest of the stuff is all just kind of debt service. So I haven't filled in all the numbers here. I guess I can do that. So I don't know if this is the exact number yet, but we're a shade over $12 million at the moment right now. So I'll have to go back and make sure I've carried all the lines over. I think there's a few that are still for discussion that probably haven't been carried over. So we're looking at approximately 12 million and change so far, which, yeah, that can't be right. It's only a 0.4% increase. And we all know there's no way that's accurate. So. Any questions about any of the budget lines? I will find out those, the town clerk and Board of Health and some of those other things, make those adjustments for our next meeting. Christine, did you have a question?
General question for you.
Sure.
Do we, for all these people that are being paid stipends for certifications, do we have copies of their certifications or some type? I mean, is there anybody that has that information?
That's a great question.
So Christine Kelly gets the certification compensation as the treasurer tax collector. And when she got her certificate, it was kind of celebratory. It was a big to-do. So she brought the certificate in and we had a printout of the state statute. So there was nothing left up to the imagination.
But how does it work though? Is that something that it's, you know, once you get it, it's like a degree, you can't ever lose it?
No,
you have to maintain your certification.
You have to maintain it. You have to maintain
follow up to make sure you've done your continuing education credits?
Well, so we do with the with hers, and then they have that line available in assessors, but Wendy is still, I think, working towards that. So they didn't budget the $1,000 for it for this current year. But for the treasurer tax collector, everybody knows when she's taking her courses for recertification, and yeah, that's very openly discussed, and she produces, you know, the credits from that class and everything to make sure that she's maintaining it and that we're not just paying $1,000.
Probably would be a good idea to establish some sort of a procedure. Do we have personnel files? I mean, I don't know how it works. Do we have personnel files?
We do, and I want to say, I know when Christine got hers, Barbara was still there at the time, and we treated it similar to how they treat contracts. Like the town accountant got a copy of the certificate, and I remember Barbara paper clipping it to the statute that said that she was entitled to this compensation. It was very like an official process, and the payroll form went with it once she had been paid the $1,000, showing that she had in fact been paid. And yeah, we put the continuing ed type stuff does go into the personnel files.
Okay.
There aren't many people though with these statute dictated certificates. But for the elected offices and theirs, I'm not sure of what they do. I don't want to say something that's incorrect. I only can speak for the treasurer tax collector one. That's been done very openly, and Barbara asked for it the second that, I don't even think that the ink was dry on it, and Barbara got a copy of it and, made sure it was all in order.
Great. Okay. So I think that brings us to an end of the budget discussion from the expense side. And I know Lisa was going to walk us through a little bit on the revenue side of things. So I don't know if Lisa, if you want to share your screen and take us through what we anticipate for revenue, please. So you're muted, Lisa. So if nope, still muted.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry. When I share my screen, it makes it hard to see the buttons at the bottom. So I know when I was on finance committee, the levy was a confusing thing. And I know that people this year with their tax bills were like, my tax bill can't go up more than 2.5%. What's going on? So I had it explained to me very clearly. And I just thought really quickly I would tell you what these terms are. There are three terms. The first one at the top of this is called the levy ceiling. That is the most a town could ever bill in property taxes, and it's equal to 2.5% of the full and fair cash value of the town. Right now, our levy ceiling is at approximately $15 million. The next line over here is your levy limit. Right now, our levy limit is about $4 million under the ceiling at about $11 million. That number is the number that increases by 2.5% each year, plus new growth, plus it could also increase if there was an override. That's the only way that number is ever increased. The 2.5%, new growth, and if there's an override. And you could never have an override to go above your ceiling. Could never be higher than that. Now, traditionally, or at least for the last few years in Cisco and things, we fund underneath the levy limit, which is considered the levy, just plain old one word, levy. And right now, as of last year, we were about $600,000 under the levy limit. So when we used to say to Barbara, well, what does it mean if we only want to increase taxes 2%, 2.5%? I really don't know how that number came to be, because it's really not a way to calculate that per se. But if we keep our levy at, again, under $600,000 under the levy limit, we're not increasing taxes by more than that 2.5%. So the levy itself, that is the money that we raise for property taxes. So that's just the property tax and personal property, real estate. It doesn't include motor vehicle or any other fees or anything. Those are all considered other revenue sources. And here's just a quick, it shows your levy limit last year was $1 million. The 2.5% was 25,000. New growth would be 15. And if there was an override, it would bring your levy limit up to $1.14 billion, which is still well below their ceiling in this example. So I try to take the numbers to try and give you guys a revenue number. Barbara's number, Lisa's number, let's just call it Plympton's target number. And
it's always going to be known as the Lisa number. I'm sorry. You own it.
It's the Lisa Hart number.
It's from your days on the committee, fondly. You always insisted on a number.
Well, I know, because I never quite understood where these numbers come from and how she can, come with this, where does this number come from? But our target number to raise and appropriate this year to stay would be 12,023, which is our levy limit this year, less $600,000 that we're going to try and stay below the levy limit. Plus, and then it also includes the cherry sheet and the local estimates. That's the number we would like to try and be at. You take the budget, which this number I believe has changed now, but this spreadsheet that I sent you, if you change that number, it's all formulas now. So you should be able to adjust the budget number, adjust the warrant number, and that will give you a subtotal, the total number that we need to fund for the year.
Okay.
With the numbers I had on Wednesday or Tuesday, it was $13,335,870. Take that total amount, subtract out the amount we're agreeing to spend from capital. I put in 510. Again, none of these numbers are in stone. They could be adjusted by you how you felt necessary. Free cash, I'm assuming 258,000. We were approved with 283,000. It's a little close, but I'm comfortable with it this year because I feel our free cash was probably certified a good amount below where it should have been. There were a lot of problems closing out last year's budget. And the state actually came and they said, well, when we figure this out just with our numbers, it's looking like we should have about $500,000 in free cash. But they had to go with this lower number because that was the only number we could prove. Now, the good thing is that free cash completely recalculates next year. So it's not like we lost anything. We just might end up with really good free cash next year. I know last year there was some talk about not spending all the free cash. And the reason a town would do that is kind of like a savings account. It's not like they take what's left over your free cash this year and add new free cash to it next year. But anything you don't spend this year kind of goes just into your free cash next year because it's money you haven't spent that you had. So when Liz and I looked at where to apply for articles, that's the other thing I would strongly suggest going forward. And I'm coming up with a couple of financial policies that at some point maybe we can all talk about and try and get something done for the town. The audit has been requesting it for a number of years, and the classes, I've recently been taking a bunch of different classes, and it's strongly recommended that the town has financial policies. We don't really have any written financial policies, or very few. Free cash should only be used, except like some towns say, except for 1% or a very small amount of it, for warrant articles or non-recurring expenses, because it is a funding source that's not recurring, necessarily. There's no guarantee on it. I also subtracted out $200,000 from that MMDT stabilization fund. And that is kind of, it's not the regular stabilization fund. It's not the one we add more money to. It's kind of a fund that was originally there and sort of just been sitting there. It most times was not even included in when somebody said how much money is in the stabilization. That $200,000 kind of was just this account that was there. So we've used that to try and meet the costs we have. And then the $200,000 that we normally take out of the ambulance fund, which would probably supplement a budget line in the budget, comes to a raise and appropriate of $12,167,525. If you can see, that is over the target by 144,000. We could easily still fund that because it's still, well within the 600,000 that we're allowed to tax. And we've also made cuts at this point. So these numbers change, and hopefully that would bring us a little bit closer to that target number.
Great.
And that's that.
No, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Very helpful. Thank you. So just for my own purposes, so you mentioned using that $200,000 from the MMDT fund. So that would make that fund go away, right? So we wouldn't have to worry about trying to track it going forward. We would just know we have capital stabilization and regular stabilization, and there's no hidden
Correct.
blocks anywhere or anything. So yeah, okay. Good.
Correct.
All right. Okay, good. Any questions for Lisa about the revenue side of things? Okay, so we do have one more item to talk about. We have a reserve fund transfer to discuss. But before, I just want to, kind of close out the budget thinking here. At this point, we are scheduled to vote with the Board of Selectmen, I believe, on the 25th, which is 2.5 weeks out. I think we have a couple of loose ends to tie up prior to that, but I don't think there's a great deal. So I'll open it up for discussion on what if you feel like we can accomplish those things in maybe a half an hour meeting before the Board of Selectmen meeting on the same night, or if you would prefer that we meet separately as a FinCom, for 45 minutes or an hour or so, just to kind of wrap up all of these few loose ends that we have. So what's the preference of the group?
Before the selectmen.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather before the selectmen.
Okay.
Just allow enough time for any discussion.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. So is on the 25th, are you folks meeting at, well, we can always meet separately and then just join you halfway through your meeting, I suppose, right? We could do that. Okay.
Yes, I can send you the Zoom info for hours, so you can post your meeting with that. But I'm wondering if for that evening, you should probably, to be safe, post 2 different agendas. Post one for your start time with your own Zoom information, and then post a second one that's to attend the selectmen's meeting and use the Zoom info I send you.
Yes, that works. Okay.
That way people could log into, see you at both times. What time do you want, what time do you think you'd be starting at that you'd be available to come to selectmen so that we can kind of structure our agenda? We usually start around 5:45, but we could move this discussion and the votes to kind of the last thing on there and give you an opportunity.
I'm thinking we could probably meet at 5:30 and then we should be available to join you folks by 6:30, I think if that works. I don't think we would have much more. I don't think we would need to discuss things much more than an hour, if it would even take that. So I think to be safe, if you put us on your agenda for 6:30, that would work.
Okay.
Wonderful.
I'll get a draft special town meeting warrant out to everybody in the morning. I was just moving some things around with the police tasers and some of that, but I'll get that out and I'll make the updates to the annual as well.
Okay, great. Then I believe the only remaining item we have to discuss this evening is a reserve fund transfer that I have misplaced.
Nate, do you need Mark and I for that?
No, we do not. We don't.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do you second, Mark? Okay. Roll call vote. Mr. Russo. Mrs. Joy, yes. Okay. Good night.
Thank you both. Appreciate your input.
Good night. Thank you.
So yeah, I printed it out.
I have it here, Nate.
It's
that's
10,
helpful.
you were looking for $10,000, right? And the
Yes,
legal line is overdrawn by about $900, right?
Yes, $899 and I think 24 cents thereabouts. And I'm looking for $10,000, which interestingly enough would put us at 60,000 total for the fiscal year, which is where we always end up. But we tried to be optimistic and, it didn't work out though. I did send something to the various departments who utilize legal. Truth be told, they all do a good job as far as keeping me in the loop about what they're talking to town council about. And they do try for the most part to get answers from sources that don't cost anything. I did send something out though to kind of put a hold on some of that. Unfortunately though, when I went around to those various departments, some of it's kind of outside of our control. Just as a quick example, Board of Health is involved with 2 different matters that involve legal proceedings. And we thought that this was like the light at the end of the tunnel and that these things were going to be wrapped up. And apparently when they logged on with the housing court for the court hearing, I guess it's called, when they were on there, the court officer came onto the Zoom call and said, no, the judge wants to meet in person next month. So that was all, again, money spent on our legal counsel to be on that call and to prepare for it. And now that those 2 matters are in the hands of the court, there's not really an option to press pause. I have talked to our legal counsel about, we don't want to pursue anything additional with those things, but we do want to see those through to completion because both of them were significant issues for the town. And we've already invested a year's worth of time and effort on these things. And they are at, I don't want to say the final step, but close to it. They're going to be assigned a court date sometime within the next month or so. That will cost us money because town council is going to have to physically appear and all that. But I don't really see that I could cut those things off mid-process without getting into an actual legal situation. And then we are pursuing, some of the solar projects have cost us a bit in funding, but I am working with Wendy and she's been very proactive at kind of reapproaching some of these solar entities, asking them to contribute more money towards our legal services. So she has a nice way about her when asking for that, and a few requests for additional funds were sent out just in the last day. So, everybody's taking it seriously, but we have quite a few big things that are, they're just not quite at their end point yet. So I'm hoping the $10,000 does it. But we are coming into kind of an expensive time. We need town council to review the warrants to be at town meeting. But I'm hoping that 10,000 does it. It should come out right around there, I would think. And we're always usually at 60, but we got a little ambitious and tried to fund it at 50 this year.
Any more questions for Liz about the legal line? If not, I will entertain a motion to transfer from the reserve fund to line 260, the amount of $10,000 to cover unforeseen legal expenses.
Move to transfer from the reserve fund sum of 10,000 to make it so moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Stephen, Marilyn, appreciate that. Roll call vote. Catherine Shepard.
Aye.
Steve Lewis.
Aye.
Marilyn Brown.
Aye.
Mike Lemieux.
Aye.
Nathaniel Sides, aye. Motion carries unanimously. Are there any other items for discussion that I have neglected or forgotten or otherwise glossed over?
Nate, you'll get me a copy of that, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and feel free to remind me in 3 days when I forget. All right, hearing no other items for discussion, I'll say thank you. It's been a long evening. I do appreciate everyone's feedback and participation. So thank you very much for that. And I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Thank you, Steve.
Seconded.
Catherine Shepard.
Aye.
Steve Lewis. Marilyn Brown.
Aye.
Mike Lemieux.
Aye.
Likewise, we're done. 8:36. Thank you all very much.